Hey, David Julin here. I want to talk to you a little bit about a passage from the 13th chapter of John, verses 1 through 17. It's often called the foot washing passage. It's the passage where Jesus, shockingly, surprisingly, washes the feet of the disciples. Now, this passage, we've heard it probably so much it doesn't shock us, but it shocked and surprised the disciples because Jesus, the rabbi, the teacher, is doing what a slave or a servant would be required to do. And this is just something that really, knocks the socks off the disciples there. And Jesus does this act, and as I look at it, he doesn't do it in an apologetic manner. Like, oh, well, by the way, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to do this also. He does it in a way that says this exemplifies who he is and who he's talking and who he wants the disciples to be. In fact, he says, now that I have washed your feet, you need to wash each other's feet. And I don't think that stops with the other disciples around there in John chapter 13. I think clearly John, the writer of John, means this and understands this to extend to all those that we encounter and all those who are part of the church today. If we jump over into Galatians, we have another passage that I think gives some insight into this. In Galatians 2, 5 through 11, we see this passage that happens before Jesus comes into this world. It's the passage where Jesus says he did not consider equality something to be grasped or held on to, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. So now we see Jesus living out, doing what he said that he was going to do, what Paul talks about. And not only is this a passage that we are called to obey, but he also says in verse 17, if you do this, if you do it, you will be blessed. That's a promise. If you do it, you will be blessed. So Christian humility, as exemplified by Jesus, can offer a lot of things for us. One, it can help us get off the loop of comparison in our life. That relentless idea today that we have to be compared to everybody else. Also the envy and the jealousy, it can diminish that. It can dilute that because, that's one of the things we find in advertising, social media. You're not quite good enough, so you need to buy this product. Another thing I think we need to see is the fact that I have found in my years as a pastor that being humble, Christian humility, causes us to be better church members. We're not so worried about who gets credit. We're not so worried about who has the right leadership position. I think another thing that Christian humility allows us to do is it opens us up to be a learner. When a cup is full to the brim, you can't pour anything else in it. And pride, sort of like what James calls the pride of life in James, the book of James, the pride of life means we're unable to listen and to learn, to give and receive what God wants us to give. So, what God wants us to learn. There's not enough room. The national championship football coach, Nick Saban, I noticed not long ago, he said, obviously in a different context, he said everybody that comes to the University of Alabama is a great ball player. But he said the difference is, in those who get better, is they're willing to listen. They're willing to listen. And I think that's important for us to think about that. In order to get better, we need to be a listener, a learner. That's what a disciple is. A disciple learns from the rabbi or the teacher. And he said, unless you're willing, Coach Saban did, unless you're willing to take constructive criticism, you're not going to get any better. So being a learner applies in all aspects of life, and it requires humility. So listen, let's be a person who aspires to humility, particularly Christian humility. Get off that relentless loop of comparison. Be a better church member and a learner. Listen, God bless you, and I sure hope I see you soon sometime around here in Cramerton.